Hola, everyone. Welcome to Cultura Convos Season 1. Today we are on episode 4, and I'm really excited because today I'm celebrating a 1 year anniversary of my first children's book, Two Homes, Dos Casas and Dos Casas. So I wanted to share more about that journey and basically how the idea came to be and how ultimately it became a book. And I'm really excited to be celebrating that with you. Cultura Convos is a community we're forming as a space for reflections of identidad y cultura, meant to inspire, meant to educate, and really spark those hard conversations with ourselves, with others too. I always like to say, starting with ourselves first. So, through personal reflections, stories, conversations, whether it's my own or with other guests, this community is forming so that we can become the best version of ourselves by writing and rewriting our story from a place of strength as opposed to shame, as opposed to embarrassment. And I'm really excited for, yes, continuing this journey and having you join me alongside it. Our goal is that we begin to embrace and celebrate our cultural identity, learn about ourselves, learn about others, and at the same time, remember that there's no one identity that defines us, and that's all we are. We are multiple things. So my name is Edith. You can also call me Edith. Either is fine. And I am many things right now, your host for Cultura Convos. I am also a mother, a daughter, a fiance. I say a life partner. It just makes, I don't know, I like that better. And the author of my first children's book, Two Homes, Dos Casas. Two Homes, Dos Casas. I have it here. This is Two Homes. This is Dos Casas. It's available on my website, adeditsuarez.com. And Two Homes, Dos Casas, and Dos Casas is about a little girl named Elena who visits her parents' first home for the first time, which is in a different country. So when she arrives, she's not really digging it. It's not really her thing. And over the course of the week, that begins to change. So the book is available as a bilingual manuscript. So I would say about 90% English with like sprinkles of Spanish throughout. And then Dos Casas is fully Spanish. And I wanted to ensure that I had that option because I wanted to make sure that kids, parents like my mom who speaks Spanish could read it to their kids. I wanted to make sure that if I wanted to send copies or copies were purchased in Latin America, the kids could read it, that the kids that are in the place where my parents are from could read it. And then also like the importance of being bilingual or multilingual and embracing that part of our cultura, which is why I was very intentional to do it those two ways. So if you want to purchase it, go to editsuarez.com. So the idea to publish a children's book, it came to me when I was in Mexico. So I was there actually for my paternal grandmother's funeral. And I was sitting in my maternal grandmother's couch and I was reflecting. The funeral had passed. I was journaling. I was just journaling all these things that I wanted to do. I was reflecting on my grandma's story and just how dope she was. Like so many stories I learned about her, stories she told me. And, the more I thought about the beauty in our culture, what I had just experienced, like the community coming together, to be with us and support my dad. My dad is an only child, which sometimes that like throws people off, I feel, because, we're Mexican and it's like, wait, what? He's an only child. But anyhow, so he's an only child. And at the end of the day, though, that hasn't always felt like that, at least for me. I can't speak for him because we've had a lot of community around us. And in that process, I thought about how it wasn't really until my 20s that I really started becoming more proud of my culture, in the sense of I was proud in the home. I was proud, like I've said before, like in my community spaces, but really beyond that, I feel like that journey started in my 20s, in large part being in college, having discussions, learning more, right? And in my mind, I'm like, dang, I feel like that contributed so much to me feeling confident, understanding, more and more where I come from. And it's an ongoing journey. I'm still learning all the time. And I'm like, I don't want kids to be in their 20s like I was, to finally start becoming proud of who they are, where they come from, the stories of their parents, and not feel embarrassed about them and all that stuff. So for me, that's why the book became like a priority. You know what? I'm going to start with the book. I already wanted to do something like a podcast or something like that, but there was multiple reasons why I didn't go that route. And the book felt like, okay, I could do this. This is something I could do. I became really excited about it. And for me, if I feel excited about something, it's always a good sign. So that was really it. And from then I remember writing, and I started writing. What I realized quickly though is what I wrote wasn't really a story. It was more like a reflection of basically of memories I had with my grandma. But at the time I was like, oh, this is a story. I sent it to some friends. I was like, it was in Spanish too. And I have, friends who like grew up in Latin America, studied over there. So I sent it to them like, hey, can y'all, read this and give me your thoughts, not just on grammar or punctuation, but like the arc of the story and things like that. And they were kind of like, girl, you got some work to do. And they gave me some feedback, and I remember thinking like, okay, like, yeah, I got to work on it. And my journey to actually publishing, because this is 2019, at the end of 2019, so right before the pandemic. And I ended up launching and publishing the book last year. So it was like an on and off journey, like very slow. I would pause, I did other projects, and then I would come back to it. But I always wanted to complete that. So ultimately, last year is when I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I have to take it to the finish line. And thank you to everyone who helped me make that happen through my Kickstarter. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So yeah, so really in the beginning it was just like the idea. I put it out there, and once I got the feedback on the first, what I thought was like a manuscript and a story, I remember I really wanted to pursue this. So I actually talked to my little brother first. I always have seen him as a creative in the family, because he just like learned, and not even learned, but like he just knew how to draw since a very young age. Like in when you're 5, and some kids it's just like, whoa, they have another level of skill when they start drawing. And at first I thought I was going to do it with him because I wanted him to be my illustrator. So that ultimately changed. So I had the idea. Now it was like I was more diving into the process of like, what would it take for me to actually make this happen? So I reached out to my little brother. Eventually, I basically had the courage to like voice it out loud to people outside of, the people that I'm most comfortable with. In this case, it was like my little brother and my family. And once I voiced it, it was like doors started opening, right? So I remember I told one friend, she's like, oh, I actually know someone that's self-published. If you want to talk to her, I'll connect you. And we did. We spoke to her. And through talking to her, I basically learned how a lot of traditional publishers don't even allow you to choose your illustrator. So, here I was coming in like, oh, this is my illustrator, my little brother. And they were like, well, in hybrid it could work. In traditional, most of the time you submit the manuscript, you do the manuscript, but then they take care of the rest, including who the illustrator of your book will be. So right away at that time I was like, you know what, I'm going to go the self-publishing route, because I wanted to have more autonomy on my first book. And although that kind of changed back and forth, then I kind of thought I was going to do traditional, then I would come back. Ultimately, I was really just trying to learn more about what the process would be and talking to different people. And through, again, voicing it, I had a friend who was like, oh, Edith, I saw this storytelling academy that has workshops in the weekends, and this weekend or something like that. And I ended up enrolling. And Storytelling Academy it's the Storyteller Academy. It's still out there. It's still active. I loved it. The workshops were amazing. I met some great people. I had like a group of writers that we would meet here and there, and I still keep in touch with them. So that group was amazing. And this is one of those moments when people are like, I'm not being sponsored. I really am not. I really just enjoyed my time there. And the founder was an author himself. And it was just really, really helpful taking that workshop because it made me realize that the story I thought I had sent to my friends wasn't really a story. Like it was more of like just adult reflections on paper, which could turn into a story, but it wasn't a story as is. And it's almost like I had to go back to like the basics of English class of like, wait, a story has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end, right? And really through that experience in the storytelling academy is how I ended up coming up with the idea specifically of the plot for Two Homes Dos Casas. The author slash founder of Storyteller Academy said a few things that really resonated and I want to share because I think they're important. One of them was he basically asked us like raise your hand if you went to school and learned math. And we a lot of us raised our hand. And then it was like, you know you can learn how to draw. Like if we only had as much drawing and art class and literally a class to learn how to draw as much as we had a math class or a reading class or even a science class, then all of us in that room could learn how to draw. Now, of course, there are gifts, there's talents that what we do with what we learn and what comes out is unique. It comes from something bigger, and that creation is something bigger. And it would differ. At the end of the day, though, we can all learn how to draw. And I remember thinking, like, oh, dang, like, I guess I had never thought of that because I had always, again, growing up with a little brother, which he's not little, y'all. I have to confirm that because then people will be like, girl, he's like 6'2". I'm 35. My little brother is like 4 years younger than me and super tall. And I like to say I'm average, although most people will say I'm short. And anyhow, I always saw him as the creative. I don't think I saw myself as the creative, because I just felt like I don't know how to draw. Like, if that was the thing that defined creativity, which I feel like for a long time, I really did. I didn't necessarily see myself as a creative. But here I was like kind of reframing that and realizing no, like there were so many other things that I do, how much I enjoyed art class when I was in middle school, and like how good I was actually in art class. And I hadn't really thought of all those things because I had for so long now been in this more like academic kind of route, right? That didn't really involve the arts as much. So it really started making me realize that, like, really tap into that identity to say, wait a minute, I am a creative. And we all are creatives and we create in different ways. And there's different forms of it. But it was like, oh, like I could learn how to draw. Like I could, I guess, writing and journaling and all that is also a creative. So that really, really helped me reframe how I was thinking of it and approaching this journey. And then through one of his tips, which was like going on long walks, is what helped him. Already, there's different reasons how we can build a relationship and spend time with our creativity. But for me, the long walk just sounded so peaceful, so nice. And because right now I'm in, Georgia, there's so many trees. So it was almost like, yeah, I definitely want to do that. And through those long walks, I got the idea of the plot for Two Homes, Dos Casas. And at first, it wasn't even called Two Homes, Dos Casas. That was more like the placeholder title that I put on the Google Doc because I was like, you know what? I'm not going to get stuck on the title. Like, I kept going back with different titles. And I was like, let me just not get hung up on the title, just put like something so that I can find the document and then work on the plot. And the idea came because I had a memory of how my mom tells me that the first time I went to Mexico, I literally like cried. Like I didn't like it. Like I arrived there and I was like, is this where we're staying? And in my mind, I have a memory of like just seeing dirt roads and like a cow in my abuelita courtyard. And whether that is an actual memory or just like my parents repeating the story over and over again to the point that I think I remember it, I have no idea. But I do have a recollection of that, of just like seeing dirt roads and then like a cow and thinking like, wait, this is where we're going to stay. Because growing up in Long Beach in the city environment, it was just different. And of course Mexico has cities and all that, but we were from a rancho, so it was a very different, like it was a contrast form of living, right? But ultimately, like I loved going to Mexico all the way to my teens. I would go. When I was older, I still love to go. So the story was like, in the beginning, sometimes we don't like something, but over the course of time that can change. So I took that and used it to make the story, to write the story to Homes Dos Casas, which I wrote as a bilingual manuscript. And then I had it fully translated to Spanish because even though I'm fluent in Spanish, writing in Spanish to that level is something completely different. So I worked with Alejandra for the illustrations, which was amazing. And then I worked with Mariela for the translation. And that collaboration was really beautiful. It was smooth. And I can talk more about that process in another episode. That was really what started the idea of wanting to write something, because through the Storyteller Academy, I had the opportunity to spend time, dedicating time to brainstorm, to flush out an idea, to think of a plot, and then to work with it with the group, which was really, really helpful. Ultimately, I stopped taking workshops, but I feel like at some point I would definitely go back. One thing I want to highlight in talking about the process is how, I didn't really see myself as a writer or a creative. And I had to really tap into why, which is a bit of, I think, what I shared earlier about just growing up in a house where I always thought of my brother as a creative. And then two, I I went to Long Beach City College before I transferred. And one time I got feedback from one of my professors about my writing. And I feel like ever since that, I was always like a little bit self conscious. Like, I don't think I saw myself as a great writer. So I always had this fear, like, oh my gosh, like one day when I get to my master's, like, what if I'm not that great at writing? And what I realized is like, one, there's different forms of writing, right? Academic writing is very different than like a children's book or me journaling or whatever it is, like creative writing. And then, so when I was in my, master's, I remember like, yeah, like there were some classes where it was kind of like, girl, you gotta work on your writing. And like literally, that's not how the professor said it, but in a different way. But ultimately, that's what they were saying. And then again, then there were classes where like I remember I was kind of shocked in my operations class. Like I would get A's in my writing, but it was a very different form of writing for that class. It was more like analysis and things like that. But anyway, all that to say, like I think because I was thinking a lot of it in academic, I thought like, oh my gosh, I'm just not that great with writing. And writing is one of those things where you have to practice it. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And I guess that goes with a lot of things, right? But you learn more and more, you find your voice. So it was really like throwing that other stuff out the window and then just focusing on this form of writing and really like the story and making a story that was relatable, which I knew it would because it was sparked by a personal story. And I knew that so many other people had a similar experience, whether they were, Mexican or Latino or not. I did write it thinking of Latinos, first and second generation, like Latinos in mind, but I also knew that it could be expanded to other first and second generation cultures, right? So I'll pause there. And then the other thing I want to point out, thinking about this, is how I was reading, I was listening to the audio for Big Magic, which is a book by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I remember in her book at some point she says like sometimes so many of her friends or people, or I'm paraphrasing, but it's like they kind of want to go back to school to get a writing degree. And at some point I thought about that, right? Like, oh, maybe do I need to go back to school? And because I'm really passionate about storytelling, it wasn't just like writing. And then in her book, at some point she said like she tells people not to, and I was like, okay, I won't. And again, I could craft it, I could learn it, I could spend time with writing, with storytelling, with my creativity in other ways. So that was also something that helped me kind of like, all right, don't feel like you have to do that. You can still write your story and learn in different ways. It doesn't have to be through an institution like academia. So that book really helped me. Being in that class, I would say, was also just so important because I was surrounded by other creatives, and I felt, I want to say like at home in a lot of ways. I felt in alignment. And even being here in Atlanta, it's interesting because whenever I talk about growing up in Long Beach, and I sometimes have to clarify, like, well, Long Beach and LA are very different, even though we are part of, Los Angeles County. It's a very different vibe. It's a very different place. Sometimes I say that to say that people will like assume, I don't know, I was like in Hollywood all the time or something like that, And for me, I don't feel like growing up in Long Beach, like I was very close to that world, right? Of like other creatives. If I reflect now, yes, I can see like, oh wow, I did have a lot of creatives around me. But it wasn't like the stereotype of like, oh, you're so close to Hollywood, therefore actors, therefore, celebrities, et cetera, et cetera. Like that was just not my life. However, I feel like in Atlanta, it's almost like my proximity to other actors and even celebrities in some form. Not that I see a bunch of celebrities, but I have seen a couple. Like Ti has his cafe not too far, and like he'll be chilling out there. Like I don't think I saw that. Like even Snoop Dogg, I always wanted to like cross paths with him, but like I didn't. So anyway, I say all that to say because there is something about being around other creatives that in this season of my journey, I started being more intentional with one, putting myself in there, like Storyteller Academy, but also like it just naturally happened. Like I, I was surrounded by actors, and even though I personally didn't feel like, oh, I want to act, it was really nice being around that space. And I feel like I felt at home without really knowing that, in the sense of like, wow, like I love the vibe. I love the diversity in creatives. And I think that was another thing that kind of pushed me forward and like, okay, I feel like I'm where I need to be. With that in mind, I was working a lot on myself at the time too, like pushing through my like I read this thing one time that said seek discomfort, and I really took that to heart. And I started doing things that would get me out of my comfort zone. One of them was like going, you know one of them was taking an improv class. And it was really really fun. Like I had so much fun. It just did push my comfort zone because I just to do random things in front of people was harder, but it was fun too. So anyway, I was doing things like that to also work on myself, and then ultimately, I feel like all those things just helped make other things easier, right? So with the book, when I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to take this to the finish line, I'm going to make it happen. I had already, I already had like the manuscript pretty much done, but I would keep rereading it, keep reducing the words, keep making it shorter and shorter and shorter because it's a children's book. So I didn't want it to be too long. And finally, when I got it to like the level. I felt good. I liked this story. There's a lot I was doing with my own money, right? So I went to Readsy. It's a website, and I found like an editor and like a editor that not just does grammar and punctuation, but also like the arc of the story. And through that conversation, I had mentioned to her, um, I'm going to do this with my little brother. We're both going to like self fund it. I wrote it and I was basically leading everything. But once we were in this stage, me and my little brother decided that we were both going to fund it. And he was just passionate about it too. He believed in it. So he's like, sis, like, I got you. Like, we can go halves on it. At some point, she was like, wait, have you ever thought about a Kickstarter? And I'm like, I have heard of Kickstarters, but I guess I hadn't thought of it. She's like, yeah, like maybe that's something you can consider, like, fundraising. When she said that, I'm like, that's what sparked it. I was like, I hadn't thought about it, but that's not a bad idea. And literally, I don't even remember when I decided to actually do it. But I remember the more I thought about it, the more excited I got. And I'm like, you know what? Like, yeah, like this will allow me to create a better product, right? Because I'll have the funding instead of trying to like do it, the lowest budget ever, because it was going to be my first book, and because it was self-funded, it was, it was going to look different. I thought it was a good idea, and I was like, "Oh wow." And then the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, "You know what? I'm going to self-publish." I'm trying to figure out when was it when I decided to go the self-publishing route, because I kept going back and forth, because there's advantages and disadvantages to both, right? Like, the advantage of a traditional publisher is that you submit your manuscript and they take care of the rest. Like, when it comes to the marketing of the book, again, finding the illustrator, doing all the things to make your Google Doc look like a book and become a book. And going the self-publishing route, you have to do everything. And there was a part of me that's like, well, I love starting things. I love the brainstorming process of things. I love the creative process of things. That's what I've been learning in this journey. And I like just taking an idea and making it happen. At the same time, that's a lot of work that you have to do. And I was working full time, so I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to actually like have the capacity for that. And then two, it's do I want to spend my energy doing that or do more writing? So for me, ultimately, what the reason why I decided to self-publish, even though for a time I was thinking of doing the traditional route, because I was like, you know what, I don't want to start a whole business. Basically, let me just do the traditional route. Is one, I believe so much in the story, and I had heard stories of people that would pitch their story, and get denied, not get a call. And I'm like, you know what? I know that this story is going to resonate with so many people. I've already had people read it, give me feedback, and I'm getting amazing feedback. So I know this story is going to resonate and it's going to be successful in a lot of ways, and it's needed, right? And I'm like, I don't want to really have to really knock on doors and pitch my story. And at the same time, I I enjoy the process of creating something, and I want to have autonomy for this product because it's my first book. It's very intentional. It comes from, part of my story that I know many people can relate to. So I'm like, I want to have more autonomy. I want to choose the illustrator. At that point, my little brother had decided he didn't really have the capacity to, draw for me. So I had decided like I was going to have, find someone, and I wanted to be intentional with who the illustrator was going to be. For example, I wasn't like, oh, she has to be Mexican, right? But I did tell myself it has to be someone that either is essentially someone that understood the culture and had lived in Mexico or was very close to understanding the culture in a way, and not, I don't want to say in whatever way, but it's almost like they didn't have to be Mexican, but they had to understand, Mexican culture, the architecture, how, a rancho could look like, the pueblos look like, and someone that I didn't have to also explain a lot of things in my manuscript, right? Like they just got it and they could read it and they could visualize it and I could talk about my vision and they could understand it. And that's ultimately what self-publishing allowed me to do. Like I looked through Instagram, a lot of the illustrators I liked were booked, and then I was very fortunate to, work with a couple to get a test sample on their art. And I worked with Quimera, who also Alejandra is also her name, and it was amazing. If y'all have seen my book, her illustrations are amazing. And that was a beautiful collaboration because one, I told her I want to give you creative freedom, right? Like, yes, I have a vision. Yes, I have this manuscript, and I had a vision because my little brother actually did draw my doodles. So this also helped her kind of see what we had in mind. Doodles is kind of like, sketches, like quick, not even like a full sketch, but just like quick things that kind of give you a picture of what we're thinking. So we shared that with her, but I also wanted to give her that creative freedom to like run with it in some ways, right? And I didn't want to be like this micromanager of like, you have to do it like this. And sometimes I felt like I did do that. But it was interesting because she actually told me, you know what, Edith, like it's easier working with you because you have a vision. Whereas sometimes I work with, well, I don't want to put words in her mouth. It's harder when you're working with someone who just tells you like, oh, do whatever you want. When you have a vision, it actually, this is like paraphrasing her words, it actually makes my role easier. So that actually allowed me to, just feel better because I guess I was like worried that I was going to be this like super like nitpicky person, which I'm learning that for certain things, I guess that is one word that could be, but it's because I wanted to be very intentional with it, right? So like, let's say when she gave me the the photo, like the first illustrations, right? Like the skin tones of the characters, like I wanted to ensure that they were like dark brown skin tones too, not just like all light skinned characters, right? And then there was like personal stuff, like at some point I showed my dad the book and I showed him how I used parts of our real pictures from Mexico. And one of the pictures in the book is like my abuelita's lavadero, where she built it herself with her hands. That's where she, used to wash clothes. And my dad was like, oh, pues ese lavadero tiene la manita de tu abuelita allí, pero en el libro no se ve, And at first I was kind of like, oh my gosh, dad, like we're almost so like done with the illustrations. I don't know that I want to go back to Quimera. Like, oh, by the way, can you add this little manita print? I was kind of like overthinking it because I think I was still like not wanting to be that person, like every little detail, because I had already asked her to change like little details here and there, but for me they were big, right? And then I talked to Marcel about it. Marcel is my life partner that I mentioned earlier. He was like, Edith, like, this is huge. Like, this book has so much, not just through the story, but it has like so much story of your own family, even through the illustrations and just things that, yeah, maybe other people might not know, right? When they read it, but like, so like, if your dad wants that and that's important for him and you have this autonomy to make it happen, like, do it. And I'm so glad that I did do it because she was like, sure. And there's like a little manita in the lavadero, and it's my grandma's hand because that's how her lavadero is. And yeah, so all those little things ultimately were why I decided to self publish, because I wanted to be intentional. I wanted to have autonomy. And going back to the woman that, suggested Kickstarter, that was another thing that made the Kickstarter even better because I was like, oh, yes, like with the Kickstarter, like I know people can get excited for this. Like I know I have a community. I believe that they would help. At some point, once I decided to launch the Kickstarter, and for those of you who might not know, like a Kickstarter is basically like a crowdfunding platform. It's a little bit like GoFundMe, but it's different. It attracts more creators, and also if you don't meet your goal, you don't get any of the money. Kickstarter is like, here's my goal and let's reach my goal, and you have a limited time, and mine was 30 days, and if you didn't meet the goal in 30 days, then you didn't get any of the money. And I started thinking, I don't know if it was during or before, but it's like, dude, we fundraise for so many things. At least where my parents are from, it's like we used to fundraise for parties, right? Definitely for quinceañeras, for velorios, for funerals. Like there is this beauty of like we come together to pitch in for a lot of things, even when there could be a little bit drama here and there. But people come and give. So I'm like, if we fundraise for quinceañeras, like we could totally meet this. Like we can meet this. And and yeah, I am very, very grateful for my community, for everyone who donated. We have over 130 people that donated. We reached literally close to $10,000 on Kickstarter. We became a project. They have like a projects we love. We made it. If you go online, you can still see the project there. And ultimately, that is what allowed me to publish Two Homes, Dos Casas. It was a beautiful journey. I'm still living it. It's wild to think that it's already a year, but it also feels like it hasn't been that long. And then I guess a year goes by really quickly. But I'm really, really excited because the more people I talk to that have read the book, adults and kids, I I'm literally experiencing that, you know, reality of like you do something with so much love and so much passion, and you know it's going to be impactful, but there's a difference when you get like actual words of the impact, or like photos, or like, you know, quotes, like whether it's, you know, one of my cousins sent me a picture of her son's homework, right? And it was like his favorite character was Elena. And then, you know, one of my other friends, like her sister, was talking about how much they loved the book because they had just gone to DR with their kids and they could relate so much with that experience in the book, right? Of like at first not really liking it. I had some funny stories about kids wanting to all of a sudden try cow's milk. So there's some impact that I knew, and other stuff that I was like, oh well, I guess that is art. You know, you people interpret it, people get inspired in different ways, and it is what it is. So I want to start wrapping now by simply saying thank you so much to everyone that helped make my Kickstarter successful. And I am really, really grateful for everyone that continues to support. My goal is that it will bring joy and laughs and spark conversations within families about their own journeys and their own stories. So if you want to purchase it, go to edithsuarez.com. You can purchase the copies there. I use Ingram Spark. So it's a platform that is used for people who decided to self-publish like me. And then I'm learning that there are other options that I can potentially be tapping into. But I wanted to focus more on Ingram Spark, as opposed to like big like Amazon, or really Amazon, and then also like local bookstores. And I want to thank you so much. I hope you learned something from the episode. I hope you were inspired in some way. Well, I wanted to take that moment to really reflect on my own journey through this year and share part of that with you. And if you know there's any idea that perhaps has been coming back to you, that you've been working on little by little, and now you're like, you know what, it's time to take it to the finish line, maybe that sparked something for you. I want to remind you, wherever you're listening, to subscribe. And when you go to edithsuarez.com, subscribe to our community, because that is going to be a big part of how I, you know, share more information. And, you know, at this point, my goal is to publish one episode a month. And I wanted to do that because I want to be consistent. And, you know, given my capacity, being primarily at home with my daughter, I could say 3 times a month or 2 times, but right now I want to be intentional and be consistent. So that is, you know, my commitment. and I just want to be real, and I rather not overpromise. And I already have my first guest, so I'm really excited. We're going to be recording that in the next month. So thank you, everyone. I am really excited for this. Um, yeah, I'm really excited. So thank you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.